You may have heard stories of people living in their New York City apartment for $28 a month, and all thanks to rent control. Rent for the price of takeout? Sounds too good to be true. So, what is rent control? Rent control is a government program that limits the amount of rent landlords can charge their tenants. These policies date back to World War I and II. Cities with large tenant populations where virtually no new housing was being built saw a sudden influx of U.S. soldiers and their families. To prevent landlords from drastically hiking up rents, the government introduced rent control. This capped rent at a fixed amount. No matter what, landlords couldn't raise rent any higher. At least not for those lucky renters who have lived in these apartments since. The program also protects tenants from being evicted. As long as they pay their rent, they're permitted by law to live in their apartment indefinitely. This original program is no longer being enacted, and the apartments that are still locked into those rents from that time are extremely rare. 100 years later, though, almost half of New York City's apartments are locked into a different type of rent control. Today, when we talk about rent control, we refer to rent stabilization, an expanded program of rent control. Instead of a hard rent ceiling, rent can only increase by a fixed percentage every year. So, why do cities still have rent control today? And who benefits from it? The idea behind rent control these days is to protect those who are the most vulnerable to high rents and displacement, low-income tenants. Those who live in rent-controlled apartments have benefited from the program. Research has shown that tenants are more likely to stay in rent-controlled housing in the long term. But not all tenants in rent-controlled apartments are low-income, and not all low-income tenants are able to secure a rent-controlled apartment. Rent control only benefits renters who live in rent-controlled apartments. Everyone outside the program, including other low-income renters, have to navigate the market rate rents of the city's housing market. But rents for non-rent controlled apartments continue to escalate because of a domino effect that starts with the very program intended to help make housing more affordable. Yes, rent control. To understand how rent control affects the rental housing market in the long term, let's look at the most basic laws of economics. More supply of apartments would mean lower rents. In New York City, there are approximately 5.5 million renters, but only 2.2 million rental units in total. So rents are higher than in other markets. Of those units, about 1 million are rent-controlled. But because rent-controlled tenants remain in their units in the long term, this nearly halves the supply of available units on the market, which increases the divide between supply and demand, causing rent to spike even faster for everyone else. Building more rental housing to increase supply will cause rents to decrease, but because of the low profits on rent-controlled units, developers become reluctant to invest in rental buildings, choosing instead to build non-rental condos. Those who are fortunate to secure a rent-controlled apartment or who can afford market rate rents are able to find housing in the city. But those who can't either live in overcrowded housing or lose their home. The combination of a housing shortage with a market that is too slow to meet the demand of affordable housing creates a housing crunch. Despite its ongoing history of rent control, New York City is seeing the highest rates of homelessness since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Economists unanimously agree that rent control makes housing worse in the long term. While rent control may benefit some, it doesn't work for everyone. But there are proven policies that do work for everyone, like rental housing vouchers that support tenants financially, rezoning to increase development of new affordable housing, and a smarter tax system and regulations that don't shift extra cost onto tenants and keep rents affordable for everyone.